Okay, gentlemen, let's go to Daniel chapter 12. Okay, it's only 13 verses. Okay, let's read to the end. Now, at that time, Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, every one who is found written in the book. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, shut up the words, seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Then I, Daniel, looked, and there stood two others, one on this river bank, and the other on that river bank. And the one said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, How long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be? And I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, which he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever that it shall be for a time, times, and a half a time. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. Although I heard, I did not understand. And I said, My Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed to the time of the end. Many shall be purified, made white, refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. You got to understand the importance of that one verse alone, okay? Because this is almost dealing what we're dealing with today. In other words, the wicked are not going to understand. Only the righteous will. 11. From the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. But you, go your way to the end, for you will rest, and will arise to your inheritance at the end of days. Okay, now let's take a look at the notes. Let's see if we can figure out exactly what's going on here. This final chapter to the book of Daniel, okay? It's now the conclusion of Daniel's final vision, a glimpse at the very end of time. Daniel's previous revelation continues on into the third verse of this chapter. Added to this revelation are three more things. Number one, the time of the end as a special relationship to Israel. 2, those who worship God in Israel will experience a special deliverance. 3, the resurrection at the end of time is the hope of all those who have been martyred. The entire section of Daniel, from 11:36 to 12:3, gives us the major factors of the end time. There's 7 of them. A world ruler, a world religion, a world war, a time of great tribulation for Israel, deliverance for God's people at the end of the tribulation, resurrection and judgment, rewards of the righteous. Verse 1 speaks of the great tribulation. The phrase, and at that time, coincides with the events of the previous chapter. In other words, he's simply continuing. Chapter 11 dealt with the political and religious aspects of the time of the end. While chapter 12 now deals with the nation of Israel during this period. It is a time of trouble for which Israel such as there as never was. And interesting when you read those verses and you watch what's going on over there now, okay? Now, the Great Tribulation is one of the major themes of both Old and New Testaments. As early as Deuteronomy 4:30, it was prophesied that they would suffer tribulation in the latter days. Jeremiah referred to it as the time of Jacob's trouble, Jeremiah 30, verse 7. Christ described this period as the beginning with the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, Matthew 24. Revelations chapter 6 through 19 show us this period with all the great catastrophes that will overtake the world. The prophecy assures that in spite of all efforts to exterminate the people of Israel, a godly remnant will be ready to meet their Messiah when he returns. We'll see that when we get to Zechariah. Also Isaiah 26, Ezekiel chapter 20. Now verses 2 and 3 deal with the resurrection. At the climax of the tribulation, there will be a resurrection of the dead, a resurrection of the righteous, as well as a resurrection of the damned. These two resurrections, though, are actually separated by 1,000 years. At the second coming of Christ will be the resurrection of the Old Testament saints, as well as those who were martyred during the period of the Great Tribulation, Revelation chapter 20. This is the first resurrection. The second resurrection is the resurrection of the wicked, which occurs at the conclusion of the millennium, Revelation 20, verses 12 to 13. The righteous will be raised as a reward for their faith. The wicked are warned concerning their final judgment. You also look into John 5, Hosea 13, 1 Corinthians 15, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, and following the resurrection, their faithfulness will be rewarded, especially those who help turn many to God during the tribulation period. It is in verse 2 that we have the first mention of everlasting life in the Old Testament. Raised to everlasting life, while those who remain in the grave shall awake to everlasting contempt. Verses 4 to 13 cover the conclusion of Daniel's revelation. It is made clear that the prophecies which have been revealed have a primary application to those living in the time of the end. What the angel seems to be saying is that in the immediate future, attempts to understand the prophecy will be in vain. But in the time of the end, when these prophecies will become especially meaningful, additional understanding will be given. Now what it's saying here is those reading the scriptures for hundreds of years aren't going to understand them. The closer we get to these things happening, a light's going to go on, and suddenly we begin to realize, okay, now I understand. So you figure for probably a couple thousand years, as people read these, they don't know what's going on. But now we have the benefit of hindsight, and we can see what's happened, especially during Hitler's reign, and now what's going on now with the anti-Semitism on the rise. We begin to realize that this is exactly what God meant back then, okay? Verses 5 to 8. The question is asked, how long until the time of the end? And Daniel observes two men standing, one on the banks of the river, the other above the river. The man standing above the waters is arrayed in fine linen. Apparently is the same man as Daniel chapter 10, Jesus Christ. The angel asks this man how long this period of trouble is going to last, and he answers, for a time, times, and a half. The same expression used in Daniel 7 refers to that last period of time just preceding Christ's second coming. It is the last half of Daniel's 70th week, a period of 3.5 years. When this period of time has been accomplished, the period of Jacob's trouble will have ended, and the time of the end has now finished. Even though Daniel heard and saw, he still failed to understand the meaning of the end of time. Verses 9 to 13 contain a concluding explanation. Daniel, once again informed, the revelation which has been given to him will not be completely understood until the time of the end. So we've talked about that. The confirmation of history, the fulfillment of prophecy would be necessary before the final prophecies could be understood. We are given 3 time periods which date from the beginning of the abominations. 1260 days, the rule of the Antichrist, which culminates with the second coming. 1290 days until the time of the end is consummated. You know, it's misspelled there. Okay? And another period of 1,335 days. Those that reach this period are called blessed. The only answer that seems to be obvious is that the second coming and the establishment of the millennial kingdom will take time. Remember, the second coming is followed by several divine judgments. Judgment of the nations, Matthew 25. The regathering and judgment of Israel, Ezekiel 20. These judgments will require time. By the end of the 1335 days, or 75 days after the second coming, these great judgments will have been accomplished and the millennial kingdom is formally launched. The book of Daniel ends, and Daniel himself is told that he will not see these prophecies, but he will stand at the end of time. So, do we understand what's going on here at all? Any comments on this? So basically, we're talking about the Great Tribulation, which again, it goes in more detail when you get into the book of Revelation. And Daniel is also informed that, listen, you're not going to understand this. And anybody who reads this is not going to understand this until we get closer to the end of time. And so we look back now, and we historically, we can see how Daniel has been fulfilled to a certain point, and then up to today now, we can see how some of these things are beginning to unfold exactly the way Ezekiel said they would unfold, and exactly the way the book of Daniel said they would unfold. And so now we have a better understanding, okay? We now see a world that is trying to come to the point of a world leader, trying to come to a point with some kind of a world religious system, trying to come to a point with a world monetary system. All these things, and be honest with you guys, even back 50 years ago, when I first went in the ministry, there were people who laughed at this. Yeah, a world monetary system? You mean we're going to come to a time when we're not going to need money? The manager of the bank here in Springfield told me that last week. She said, oh, we're going to a cashless society. A good friend of ours, the son of one of our former pastors, who was a banker. We're going back years ago. And when I was pastoring, he actually told me, he says, no, he says, it's in the works already. The world is working on a world monetary system, and they're working on this implant in your hands and whatnot, and we've already got that. So we can no longer laugh at biblical prophecy. And those who scoffed at it, they're pretty much running away with their tail between their legs now, because it's actually happening. And it's both scary and exciting, you know? And I mean, here's the decision we may be faced with. If it comes to the point when money is obsolete and we've got to have something transplanted in us, are we going to do it? Dan.
So does that make us go to hell instantly because they refuse to comply with what it says?
Okay, here comes the discussion on the mark of the beast. In Revelation, the mark of the beast is either on the forehand or on the forehead. There's some kind of a mark. So right now they are implanting these in your hand. And so the question is this the mark of the beast? Well, we do understand that this happens during the reign of the Antichrist. And there is no beast yet. But is this the precursor? That's a tough question. I see it as a precursor, but is it actually the mark of the beast? I can't answer that, but if I was given the choice, I would not take it. That's just my decision. I mean, it just, we're getting too close to the end of time, and we don't know how these things are actually going to play out. Because we don't really, there's parts of Revelation we still don't quietly understand how it's going to be fulfilled, because the terminology and how John described things in words and terms that we don't quietly understand. We can make up things. Like John talks about dragon shooting fire. Well, if you're back then, and you saw somebody with a flamethrower or a tank, how would you describe it?
Or a plane.
Yeah, or a plane shooting. I mean, you know, it's like he's describing things he doesn't understand. And so we can say, okay, that possibly could be. It could be planes, it could be flamethrowers, it could be tanks, it could be, what's he seeing? These terrible, terrible, vicious creatures. Could very well be. But then you talk about the Antichrist. You know, it starts when a peace treaty is signed in Israel. And right now, what's the one thing that's on everybody's mind? I mean, right now, look what's going on. You got Israel. You got the Palestinians. You've got Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. Every nation surrounding Israel has now come into the battle. And even the United States, if you've caught the news, our warships are now intercepting missiles from Syria before they hit Israel. So we're already involved. It would not surprise me, and here's because my background in the military, when the government says it knows nothing, it knows everything. When the government tells you, because even in you know my story, and what I was involved with, we didn't exist. Of course we existed. But as far as the government was concerned, we did not exist until just before I got out, 1970, they finally recognized it. Then 1998, it was phased out. But so, you know good and well, we've got SEAL teams in the Gaza Strip. I mean, you know, we got American hostages. You know they're over there. And you know good and well, their job is not only to get those hostages out, but probably take out a few people. When I watched that video last week from Hamas, from Palestine, I with you, and a couple of guys have already commented, you know, like Isaac, it's demonic. You have to understand the mindset of the Islamic Jihad. And so I'm watching this video. One of the things I subscribe to, she's a Jewish reporter who's had a contract on her life for years. They're trying to kill her. And so she makes sure a lot of these videos get online. So the Palestinians are notorious for videotaping everything. I mean, everything. They videotape the beheading of babies, slaughtering of people. They just, and the news isn't going to show that, okay? Number one, they don't want you to know the atrocities because they want you to feel bad. And so this one video was out, and did I tell you about it? The father with his son? Got this father with his son, a toddler, gives his toddler Palestinian flag and sends him over to the Israeli soldiers. And the whole time the little toddler is walking, the father is yelling to the soldiers, shoot him! Shoot him! Over and over again, shoot him! And then the leader comes on and says, Israel's biggest weakness, he says, and here is the key to them, which the world does not understand, or at least they don't want to admit it. He says, the weakness of Israel, the Israelis, is that they love life. Our strength is we love death. And it's the greatest honor for a parent to sacrifice their children for the sake of Allah. And this is why we have the child soldiers. This is why if you see some of the Palestinian propaganda, or even on the news the other day, and all the riots and whatnot, you see kids carrying AKs. Kids, because they're taught from a young age to hate, and parents, and this is what boggles the mind. Parents want their kids to be killed. Because if you know anything about Islam, you're guaranteed immediate access to heaven if you die fighting. Mike.
It's interesting that you're 12 years old or 8 years old, right? You go to heaven and you get 12 virgins.
Yeah.
You're a virgin yourself.
Yeah.
But what I don't understand is this. Is the American people are blind. Media is blind. And I was telling him, why would a terrorist group envelop into their own communities and sacrifice their own people to try to get their point across? Either we're as Americans missing the whole point, or we're just blind, or we just don't want to see it. And the second question is this: what do you want Israel to do? If that was America, you see what happened when we happened to us.
Yeah.
How come Israel can't do the same thing?
That goes back to the verse we just read, Daniel, right? At the end of time, the wicked will not understand. And you're right, America, the world, they're completely blind. And you see all the uprisings, everybody's blaming Israel. And I'm thinking, what are you idiots?
Yeah.
I mean, if they did that to America, like 9/11, what did we do? Immediate retaliation. And so, no, you don't blame Israel. Well, look, they're killing civilians. What did you just do?
Yeah.
What did you do? Well, it's all right for us because, you know, this is part of our religion. This is what we do. This is how we go to heaven. I think, and like I think somebody commented, it's demonic. And now we don't like to talk about that, but it is a demonic power and a demonic authority when you've got and this goes all through the Old Testament. God warns against those that, what? Sacrifice their children. Now, we usually think of that as child sacrifices on the altar, abortion, but today, this is exactly what it is. It is parents sacrificing themselves on the sacrificial altar of Allah. And when I saw that video, I'm thinking, talk about it. And this is why you can't win a holy war. Because in the eyes of those that are over there, they're doing this for God. If I die, great, shoot me. It's like,
now, aren't we doing the same thing in this country with the whole transgender thing? You're taking little boys and little girls.
You're right. That I I am so bothered by that. The fact that young children can make a decision to transgender and the parents can't do anything about it. This has recently been a couple of court cases.
Well, you can't get a tattoo, and you can't drink, and you can't get a handgun.
So you can change your sex.
Well, you can chop things off.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that whole thing in some states is legal.
Yeah.
That's what killed me. You know,
It's legal.
I'm 12 years old, little girl, little big girl. Screw you, mom, dad. Okay.
Well, so like girls today can get contraceptives without parental permission. They can have abortions without parental permission. And the way, and Massachusetts is probably one of the most liberal states in the country. And what we allow here is just, I'm sorry guys, but it is demonic.
Yeah.
The way we're going, it is demonic. Now we want to revamp the entire educational system where we're going to teach young kids about homosexuality. And I think, really? You know, I remember, now it's been a while since I was in school, okay, but I remember even in grade school, middle school, my mom, if you would teach anything that contradicted our beliefs, we were out. Immediately out. I mean, we were in study hall. We were not in that class. And my mom would be down there, that's it. And they had to do it because you cannot violate my religious principles. But today, is at the point where you can. You can violate, like I shared the story of a pastor friend who was just knocked off a speaking engagement. And his topic was lacrosse. But when they found out he was Assemblies of God, well, your doctrines don't align with our community standards, therefore we're not going to allow you to speak. Because he was talking about lacrosse. He's a Native American. And so we've come to the point now where we're being criticized and literally banned because of our faith. And there are situations now where, based on your faith, you cannot be hired. Can you imagine that? You cannot be hired because, well, your beliefs are contrary to our moral standards, therefore we don't want you here. And this is going to be now brought into our school systems. If you want to be a teacher, you're going to have to eventually verify, you're going to have to teach this stuff. And it's like, society is becoming so sick. And again, the verse we just read, the end of time, the wicked will not understand, but the righteous will. And so we're at that point where, you ever tried to talk about these points to a non-believer? Mm-hmm. You can't do it.
No.
You can't. And this is why I think Paul says to avoid vain philosophies, which it doesn't do any good to talk to them. Now, Barbara and I have had these conversations before in different areas. You can't bring it up because they don't understand. They're on the other side, and this is why I'm such a firm believer in lifestyle evangelism, which we haven't taught here in many years. And lifestyle evangelism basically says, I don't have the right to share my faith with you until you're comfortable with me. In other words, I want you to ask me questions. So I live my life in such a way that I'm going to create questions in your mind about why I do or do not do things. And I've done this all my life. This is how we were taught. You live your life. It is what you don't say. It is what you don't do. It is where you don't go that creates questions. And eventually somebody's going to come and say, why? Now, this is what I've always taught people. When somebody says why, they've just given you permission to share your faith. If I try to share my faith without permission, I'm simply pushing people away. And so my wife and I have done this for years, and we have had, let's not talk about the gay community. We have had a lot of gay friends. A lot. I had gay people in my church. The point is, we never criticized them, never condemned them, but eventually they would ask questions. And everyone in that church, I'm going back many years now, that was gay, repented and got saved. Everyone. They would sit in our ministry. I wouldn't compromise my preaching. But eventually there came a time when I remember the young couple came, they were young, but a couple of ladies, and they came one time and says, Pastor, we've been coming here for a while, and we just realized that our relationship is a sin. Now, a little light went off. And then we will let you know that we've asked God to forgive us, we've repented, and we're no longer in that relationship. And that came because we accepted them and loved them, but never condemned them. And that's the whole point. We've got to live our lives to the people like my wife's boss out in California. Openly lesbian. I mean, you couldn't tell it from a guy sometimes. But the result of my wife, she says, we were the first Christians ever to accept her without condemning her. Eventually, that led her to church. Eventually, she got saved and became ordained and became a speaker, an advocate, you know, homosexuality and becoming a Christian. And so that came as a result of simply accepting her the way she was and not trying to point finger. And we do this too often. As Christians, we think we've got to condemn everything. No, sinners are simply doing what they do naturally. They're sinning. It's not up to me or you to point out their sin. And I've seen this. I've shared these stories before. I took a very difficult church. And fortunately, and I'll say that positively, the superintendent didn't tell me anything about it. But it was difficult, and they were very, very condemning. And I remember the day, I think I've shared this before, a gentleman came to church. He was an alcoholic and a drug addict. And he just literally ran to the altar, sobbing, gloriously saved. When he got up, he was just, you know, just like the habit was gone. It was gone. He couldn't believe it. It's gone. I haven't urge to drink anymore. The drugs, it's just gone. You know, and he walked out of the church literally on a cloud. Until old brother deacon got a hold of him, because the gentleman made this terrible, terrible sin when he walked out the front doors. He lit up a cigarette. And the old brother deacon is probably in his 80s. Pointed finger right in the chest. And you call yourself a Christian? In horror. I'm watching this. The guy never came back. Quite frankly, I wouldn't come back to a church like that's going to condemn me. And so we've had this happen here in Christian Life Center. You know? We've had it, I'm not sure it happens everywhere. People just, we've had a couple people, one person who, fortunately, they moved out of state, was very condemning. I remember the time we had a young couple, well, a single parent. Hannah had made friends in school, and the girl started coming to church and got saved. The mom started coming and got saved. Then the mom started dating a gentleman who wasn't a Christian. But he started coming to church. That's great, isn't it? Well, it was great until one Sunday, they decided to go to a Red Sox game. I mean, I've been to Red Sox games on Sundays. Well, this particular gentleman in the church saw it posted on Facebook, and the next time that he was out in their face in the parking lot, condemning the guy. The guy wasn't even a Christian. On the Lord's Day, they never came back. And I couldn't figure out why. And Sherry was good friends with him. And I finally said, well, this is what happened. I go, you gotta be kidding me. But this gentleman this is what he did a lot. You know, very good at condemning people. And he was condemning some of the events we had in the church. Like I had, when I was pastoring, to get the kids off the streets on Halloween, we had what's called a harvest party. And we had costume parties. I mean, my favorite one was Noah and the Ark. I was Mr. Noah, Barbara was Mrs. Noah. Everybody had to dress as an animal. It was a blast. I mean, it was hilarious, all right? And they had all the games for the kids and the candy and all this, and gave out prizes. And it got them off the street on Halloween. So we've done a couple things like that here called harvesting. And he was just adamant. It's satanic. You people are satanic. You're doing da-da-da-da. The next thing you know, he's attending them. And so, you know, it's just, I don't get it sometimes. We're so quick to condemn people about things sometimes we don't really understand, that we're guilty of pushing people away. And so what we've got to remember, especially in these end of times, we've got to approach things properly. And that's not always easy. Our greatest example is Jesus at the woman of the well. How are we doing on time? Okay, so you don't talk about lifestyle evangelism. This is, and I taught this when I was in South Attleboro. And here's our example. Watch what he does. He goes to an area where Jews would not go. The Samaritans, we don't go to the Samaritans. Those people are evil. They're bad. You know, they're bad. They're evil. They're sinners. I'm going to go. And Jesus sits there. The woman comes. Can I help you give water? No, thank you. I said, the water I have is bitter. Now, all he did was make a statement to pique her curiosity. Simple statement. If you only knew what I had. So what's her automatic response? What do you have? What did she just do? She gave him permission to share the gospel. So I finished teaching this class, and my assistant was, I think I shared it before, but it's a great story. Those on YouTube may not have heard it, but it was Thanksgiving, and they had everybody over to the house, all their unsaved family members. And it was at this time when David Wilkerson had come out with his new book. And he's talking about all the end time events that were about to happen. And one of the family members had heard about it. And he said, what do you think about this guy? And all this stuff, that's all these terrible events that's going to happen in the future. And all Bill said was this. Honestly, he says, yeah, but there's hope. He got up, walked out of the room. You know what he just did? He put a question in everybody's mind. And right behind him, the whole family follows him into the kitchen. And you know what their first question was?
What do you mean?
What do you mean there's hope? Oh, they just asked him permission. We're back in the living room. They just gave him permission to share the entire gospel. That is lifestyle evangelism. It is letting people know you've got something. What is it you got? And I shared the story about my son was good at that, okay? He was good at that. Like when the youth at school would ask, you know, why does Rick not do this? Or what? And the point is when he would walk away from something, or would rather go to youth group than go to the prom, they couldn't forget. He was elected king of the prom. And he said, no, thank you. No, we'll pay for your tux, your girlfriend's night, we'll rent a limo, all this. No, that's youth group night. They couldn't figure out what was so special about youth group. So you know what happened next? They started going to youth group. And we had one large, powerful youth group. Kids were getting saved. Why? Because these youth decided to do what they knew was right, rather than go along with the crowd, to set an example and walk away. And it's that walking away that caused people to wonder, and like one of the kids asked my wife, what does he know that we don't know? What makes him so different? And so he became a leader simply by not going along with what they did. And today it's so easy just to go along, and it's difficult to walk away. And sometimes it's our walking away that's our greatest testimony. When they're sharing a dirty joke, or dirty pictures, or it could be anything else that's contrary to our faith. Just the fact that we walk away creates a question. Because I guarantee somebody's going to ask you why you did that. Then the moment they do that, well, since you asked, you know, my faith, and you've got time to share the gospel. And that's what's important about this. So that's my sermon for today. Mike.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
And I believe it's Matthew 24, when Jesus comes back from the dead, the graves are opened. Now, are those Old Testament saints, right, going to be part of the second coming of Jesus Christ, since they already came?
I don't think we're told. The question is, when Christ arose, many graves were emptied, and people saw these people. Now, were they Old Testament saints or New Testament saints? We're not told. But I never thought about that. But whoever they were resurrected, and were they all of them, or were they just a few? Was God just sending a message? Listen, I can do it here. I can do it over there. We don't know. And we do know that upon our death, we're immediately into his presence, but the body stays here. And we do know there's going to be a resurrection where our bodies are completely changed. And I don't understand that, you know. And what does that mean? You know, what are we going to look like? We've got stories of those who say they have gone to heaven, or God has given them glimpses of heaven and glimpses of their family, who appeared sometimes a lot younger than they were when they passed away. Example, have you seen the movie Heaven is Real? The little boy, they documented it. And when he came back, he was supposedly dead. And he describes all these people he saw who he never knew. And when they showed him pictures, oh yeah, I saw him. Well, it was his grandfather that passed away, you know, before he was born. And when he was a lot younger, they showed younger pictures. So I'm beginning to think that those of us who've gone to heaven in our older years, when we get to heaven, we're actually probably at the time when we were the best shape of our lives. You know, younger, fit, and so we don't know. But what's interesting is different children around the world have had visions of Christ, kids who don't know each other, and yet their descriptions match perfectly. Young girl who did a drawing, and when this boy saw that drawing, oh, that's him. Now, the pictures are nothing like the pictures we see today, because we don't know. But so it's interesting, so that the way they think. But yeah, we don't know when those who are resurrected. I haven't a clue. All we know is that there were many that were resurrected. Yeah. Maybe they were the ones that just recently passed away during Christ's ministry. Don't know, but not a bad question.
My second question is this. The Church of Babylon, do you think it possibly the Catholic Church? Because when you read basically how the Pope basically accepted same-sex marriage, it's all not acceptable in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
I had a professor in college who was adamant that the Roman Catholic Church was not only the Antichrist, but the final apostate church. It's hard to be dogmatic, but if you look at history, and you look at the Roman Catholic Church, and the way they're going, it's a possibility. But you got to understand, it's a church that exists after the rapture. Here's what's interesting. You go back to ancient times, around the time of the Tower of Babel and Nimrod, called the Babylonian cult, okay? In the Babylonian cult, his wife was called the Mother of God. She had a son, which his name was Tau, T-A-U, who they claimed was virgin born. You worship Tau by using the sign of his name. They established a priesthood of monks and a group of virgins. It's called the Babylonian cult. Now you look at that, and then you compare that to the Catholic Church, and you see, okay, there's the Mother of God, there's the sign, there are the monks, there's the virgins. It's like, is it the same thing? I'm not going to be dogmatic, but it's awful interesting, isn't it?
It is,
because you go back in history, the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope, was always on the side of people like Hitler, Mussolini, others. They supported the rampage against the Jews. They supported it. And so that gives some credence, but we need to understand that the final world church is a product of the Antichrist reign, and more than likely that being between that and the Muslims, okay? the two largest groups in the world, real basically. Out of that somehow is going to come everything that's final. And so we're running out of time here. I'm going to shut off some of this stuff. It looks like John
was 10-20 years ago, the Pope had like all the different religions up on stage.
Oh yeah.
We all serve the same God, and
well, what's interesting, and I'm shutting down Zoom here because nobody else is on it. I'm going to shut this off here in a minute. Before I shut this off, there is a well-known pastor. Well, I think of at least two. One of them is well-known in evangelical circles. The other one is outside of that. And both of them have made the same comments that despite our faith, it's all the same God. And that is a lie. It is not the same God. Allah is not God. No. When they talk about Jesus Christ being mentioned in the Quran, that is not our Jesus, okay? He is not our Jesus. He's a completely different character. And so we've got to understand, we do not serve the same gods. And, well, it doesn't matter what your faith is. Well, it really does matter what your faith is. I mean, you can be a Roman Catholic and go to heaven. Yeah, I've known many born-again Roman Catholics. That's not a problem. They don't accept the worship of Mary. They don't accept, but they stay within the church for a reason because they feel they can do something. My associate pastor was a Franciscan monk, priest. And he finally realized that he couldn't do more. They could do more leaving the church and becoming a pastor. And he did. So we do have those within the Catholic Church that are trying to fight this, and they do believe the Bible. You got others who don't, and same with other faiths. So your particular faith does say something about you, and there are some faiths we know without, beyond a shadow of a doubt, because they don't accept Christ as the Messiah, or they accept erroneous doctrines. Some of these cults, we can say for certain they're not going to heaven. Okay, so like the boys now in Rangers, they're finishing up their merit on Bible doctrines, and the next thing they have to do now, they have to explain to me the 4 cardinal doctrines, which are the 4 red points of their emblem: salvation, divine healing, the Holy Spirit, and the second coming. Those are the 4 same cardinal doctrines of the Catholic Church. So the boys need to know what those 4 doctrines mean, especially salvation. What does salvation mean? Because without salvation, you don't go to heaven. What does it mean to be born again? And I had an Episcopal priest tell me one time, well, I was born once, I don't need to be born a second time. Yeah. Until, I'm not going to go into that story. There's a lot of stories about some of these guys I've known in the past. And so, I mean, the point is, except a man be born again, you can't go to heaven. It's impossible. That's God's law. That's not my law. That's God. It's His heaven. It's His home. He sets the rules, and we'll talk about that a little later. I'm going to shut this video off here.